All right, so you sent over this Luigi Mangione case, and it is wild. I mean, just looking at the Wikipedia article and these news reports you dug up, and even some of the social media stuff, it is crazy. So let's dive into all this and try to figure out who is this guy? What did he supposedly do? And why are people so obsessed with this case?
Yeah, it's definitely got all the elements of really captivating story, but it also raises some really important questions about, online culture today and how we form these narratives around these complex figures.
Definitely. So let's set the scene. We're in New York City, a fancy hotel, a high-powered CEO gets shot and killed, right? But then there's this message on the bullet casings, and it just changes everything. Delay, deny, depose. I mean, chills, right?
Yeah, it instantly connects this murder to the whole healthcare debate. And it turns out the victim was Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare. So suddenly you have this focal point for all this pent-up frustration and anger towards the whole health insurance industry.
Exactly. And then there's Luigi Mangione himself, the suspect. On paper, this guy seems like he'd be the last person to, commit a crime like this. He's good looking, comes from money, went to, Gilman and UPenn. He even interned at Firaxis Games, the Civilization people.
Yeah, it's such a contrast, right? You have this, seemingly privileged background and then this brutal, seemingly calculated act. And it turns out there's more to the story. He reportedly had some health issues himself, spondylolisthesis, Lyme disease, even had spinal fusion surgery back in 23.
So maybe there's more going on beneath the surface than we initially thought.
Exactly. It's how do you reconcile this image of the model citizen with the reality of the crime?
And then things get even weirder. Mangione disappears in the summer of 24. Gone, vanished, his own family can't find him. His mom reports him missing in November, and then bam, he's arrested in McDonald's in Pennsylvania.
Oh.
And get this, they find a ghost gun and a suppressor on him, and this handwritten thing they're calling his manifesto.
Oh, wow. The ghost gun thing adds a whole other layer to this. For people who don't know, these are untraceable guns, right?
Yeah.
Often 3D printed. So it makes you wonder, how did he even get one of these?
Yeah, and what was he planning to do with it? And then there's this outburst during his arrest. He yells, "It's completely out of touch and is an insult to the intelligence of the American people and their lived experience." And what does that even mean?
Right. It's cryptic, for sure. But then, they find this manifesto. It's this 3-page rant about the healthcare system. He goes off on corporate greed and the high cost of healthcare. He even compares insurance companies to parasites.
So is this manifesto the key to understanding his motives?
Well, you have to be careful with these kinds of documents, right? They can offer some insight into someone's thinking, but they can also be really rambling and contradictory. It's not always a straightforward thing to interpret.
And then you add in his online presence, and it's another layer of this puzzle. I mean, it's this weird mix of stuff. He's posting about pornography and the decline of Christianity, but then he's also supporting people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah, and there's that Goodreads review of the Unabomber Manifesto. He calls Ted Kaczynski a mathematics prodigy and says, "It's simply impossible to ignore how prescient many of his predictions about modern society turned out." What do you even do with that?
I know, right? It's so all over the place. And this is where that article you sent about the Gray tribe comes in, right?
Yeah, I think it's relevant here. The Gray Tribe, they're this online subculture. They reject those traditional political labels and are all about these intellectual, often controversial viewpoints. And it seems Mangione, online at least, kind of fits that mold, right? Praising Kaczynski while following AOC.
So maybe he's part of this Gray tribe. Is that what explains all these seemingly random online interests?
It's possible. They also do this thing called steel manning, which is basically trying to understand and argue for the opposing viewpoint to make your own argument stronger. So maybe that explains why he seems to endorse ideas from all over the political spectrum.
Steel manning, huh?
Mm.
That's interesting. And it makes you think how much of this online activity was just him exploring ideas, and how much of it, if any, might have, pushed him towards what he allegedly did in real life.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's one that's really tough to answer. But it definitely highlights how, that line between online rhetoric and real-world action can be blurry. And it's something we need to pay attention to, especially now in like this digital age. It's like, and then you have the online reaction to all of this, which just adds another layer of weirdness to this whole thing.
Oh, yeah, the internet is going nuts over this case.
Yeah.
And it's not like I don't know, like the outrage you might expect. It's like the opposite, right? It's all this like bizarre support for this guy.
Right, like hashtag Free Luigi is trending everywhere.
It's crazy.
People are doing these look-alike contests,
Like what?
raising money for his legal defense, even like sending money to his jail commissary account.
It's like they're turning him into some kind of like folk hero. I mean, what is going on?
It's like a textbook example of how the internet can like take a story and run with it. And in this case, it's like they've turned Mangione into this symbol, right? Like this symbol of fighting back against the system.
Yeah, I guess the whole delay, deny, depose thing really like struck a nerve with people. It's like he tapped into this feeling that a lot of people have, that the system's rigged against them.
Exactly. And then you add in the whole like underdog narrative,
Mm.
this smart guy from a privileged background who like turns against the system. It's a story that people eat up.
And let's be real, okay? We can't ignore the fact that he is like a good-looking dude. The internet loves a hot felon.
Oh, definitely. It's like his looks are almost overshadowing the fact that he's, accused of murder,
Yeah,
which is kind of disturbing when you think about it.
it is. But it goes to show, like, how powerful image can be. And speaking of image, we got to talk about that perp walk they did with him.
Oh,
The NYPD and Mayor Adams, like, went all out, right? Helicopters, tons of cops, Mangini front and center, looking all, I don't know, defiant.
oh yeah, that perp walk was straight up like a performance. They wanted to send a message, right? Like, look, we're in control. Don't even think about messing with us.
But it kind of backfired, didn't it?
Totally. Like, instead of making him look like a dangerous criminal, it just reinforced that whole rebel against the system image he already had online. It's like they accidentally turned him into a martyr.
Yeah, it's like they heard of the Streisand effect. Right.
Exactly. Like sometimes trying to suppress something just makes it bigger. And in this case, the NYPD tried to control the narrative around Mangione, just ended up amplifying it.
So here we are, right? A complex case, a suspect who's like a walking, talking contradiction, and an internet that's basically lost its mind. What does it all mean? What are we supposed to take away from all of this?
It's a good reminder to be like really careful about the information we're consuming, especially online. Like it's so easy to get caught up in story, the hype, the memes, all of that. But we have to remember there are like real people involved here. The victim, the suspect, their families. This isn't just some like abstract online drama.
Yeah, we have to be mindful of that. These events have real world consequences, and it's easy to lose sight of that when you're just like scrolling through your feed.
Totally. And as this whole thing unfolds, it's important to like step back and analyze the information we're getting from different sources. Form our own opinions based on evidence, not just whatever narrative is trending online.
It's easy to get lost in like all the craziness of this case, the internet drama, the perp walk, all that. But we have to remember there are like real people at the heart of this.
Right. Like we've talked about Brian Thompson, the victim, and how people online are reacting to his death. But what about Mangione's family? Like his parents, his siblings? What's it like for them?
Yeah, I mean, they've been pretty quiet, right? Aside from that statement at the beginning saying they were shocked and all that, they've kind of disappeared from public view. Can you imagine what they must be going through?
It's got to be tough. Like trying to reconcile the son and brother they know with this image of him as like a murderer.
Yeah, and then there's that delay, deny, depose message. Like, how do you even process that?
It's a lot to deal with emotionally. Like the shame, the confusion, maybe even some guilt.
And it's not just Mangione's family either. Thompson's family is dealing with this horrible loss, and then they have to see all this stuff online about the guy accused of killing him.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that all of this, everything we do, whether it's online or offline, it has consequences.
Yeah.
Real world consequences for real people.
For sure. And those consequences could get even bigger as this case goes forward, right? Like, what happens if Mangione's found guilty?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Like, will all that online support for him just intensify? Will he become like a martyr for this whole anti-establishment movement?
That's kind of a scary thought, right? Like, a guilty verdict could actually end up fueling this whole, like, romanticized view of him as some kind of hero.
Definitely. I think it highlights how important it is to have like real thoughtful conversations about this case and about the bigger issues it brings up. We can't just get caught up in these simplistic narratives. We have to look at the complexities, acknowledge the human cost, and examine the systems that might have led to this whole thing.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of the online discussion has been focused on, like, Mangione himself. Is he a hero? Is he a villain? But maybe that's the wrong question to be asking. Maybe we should be focusing on the systems, like you said, the stuff that creates the conditions for these kinds of things to happen in the first place.
Right. Like maybe the Luigi Mangione case isn't just about one man. Maybe it's about all of us. Maybe it's about the cracks in our healthcare system, the distrust in institutions, and the way we search for meaning in a world that feels increasingly chaotic.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what do we want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think it's a reminder to be like super critical of the information we're taking in, especially online. Like we're bombarded with stories and narratives all the time, and it's easy to get swept up in them. But we have to remember to think for ourselves. You know, be wary of hero worship and villainization. And remember that behind every headline, there are real people whose lives have been impacted. And maybe, just maybe, this whole case can make us think a little deeper about the world around us. You know, like what's really going on? What are the systems that are shaping our lives? And how can we make things better?